Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to take a look at how Joe Rogan built a multi-million-dollar podcast. Before we start, I want you to hit that red subscribe button so you never miss out on any of our videos. Let's get right into it. So persistence pays off. If you're a regular listener or watcher of the Joe Rogan podcast, you'll be aware of the format. Joe hosts the podcast in his funky studio, complete with state-of-the-art equipment and his own producer Jamie by his side. It's easy to assume that it was always this way. But if you search for the first few podcasts, you'll see that the setup was very different to how it is now. The first podcast is a case in point. You can see the video on screen right now. Bear in mind that the first episode of the podcast uploaded to YouTube was in January 2013. That's only 7 years ago, yet in that time Joe has gone from a basic operation to a multi-million-dollar podcast. As you open the video, snowflakes appear on the screen. The background hints that Joe is filming in a spare room in his house. None of the elements that many of us associate with his podcast today are present. Instead, we are left with something that resembles what any one of us could rustle up and upload to the web. The point is that even the most successful podcast on the planet started from humble beginnings. Joe could have quit at this stage before he made it big. I can't imagine he pulled in the views he does now at the start, but he persisted. In a recent podcast with Jon Stewart, Joe hints at his lack of experience when he started. If you've ever started a business or an endeavour such as this, Joe's words will sound familiar. When I started my travel blog back in 2015, I had no idea what I was doing. Blogging was an alien concept and I figured it out as I went along. It was only a couple of years into blogging that I realised I could turn it into a full-time job, and towards the end of 2018 I was able to do this. Without persistence in carrying on when there appeared to be no hope of success, I was able to get to where I wanted to be. To be successful in anything, you need to be persistent. This is never truer than when starting a business endeavour. If you keep at it, make progress and struggle forwards, you'll get to where you want to be eventually.
That way there's not as many dream matchups you never get to see.
Right.
Like one of the things that everybody got upset was by the time Floyd fought Manny Pacquiao, it was like past Manny's prime,
Right.
and Manny had a bum shoulder and all these different things.
Don't be afraid to experiment. Looking back on Joe's early episodes, they primarily involved him talking with his buddies. As a comedian, he'd invite the likes of Joey Diaz and Billy Burr onto the podcast. He still has these guys on today, but the people he invites on today has expanded a lot since the early days. Joe has had a range of people on his podcast, from the infamous chat with Elon Musk to the illusionist Darren Brown and the former presidential candidate Bernie Sanders. That's an eclectic bunch of people which only scratches the surface. Joe is not afraid to experiment when it comes to his podcast. While the format might stay the same, the people he has on come from all walks of life. This is one of the reasons I keep coming back to his podcast. Even if his recent podcasts haven't featured someone I want to hear from, I know that I can scroll through his past episodes and find something I enjoy. This is because Joe's not afraid to step out of his comfort zone and interview people from different backgrounds. Although he could invite his comedian friends on all the time, he hasn't done so. If he did, the format would become stale over time. The key thing about Joe is that he's not afraid to invite someone onto his podcast who might be controversial or who talks about ideas he might not fully understand. This is one of the reasons why his podcast is so successful. His constant experimentation with guests is what keeps it fresh. Any business needs to stay fresh to stay relevant. Those that don't fall by the wayside. Getting started is half the struggle. One of the biggest issues for many entrepreneurs is actually getting started. This is often the hardest barrier for many to clear. Whether it's the Superman complex of writing online or limiting beliefs that stop you from setting up a business, we're often our own worst enemy. What I admire about Joe Rogan is that he plunged headfirst into making podcasts. When you watch his early podcasts, and by his own admission, he was learning on the job. The setup was rudimentary. He wasn't the skilled interviewer of today, nor did he have the name or clout that he has now. His podcast is widely known today, but only because he took a chance back in 2009 and again in 2013 when he started uploading his podcasts to how many of us have had many great ideas but never followed through with them. Now I suspect most of us have. A lot of this stems from fear of failure or reluctance to try. This is the wrong way of looking at things. Not everything you do is going to succeed. Businesses come and go and many ideas fall at the first hurdle. While this may seem troubling to many, our biggest lessons often come from failure. Joe could have debated endlessly whether it was a good idea to start a podcast or not. He could have decided against it for fear of looking stupid on the internet. Instead, he went ahead, kept at it, and 7 years later is the host of the most popular podcast on the planet. This invokes the adage, you won't know if you don't try. What's worse, to have tried and failed, or to have never tried at all? And that's all for today, folks. I hope you liked the video. If you did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another amazing video from us. Until next time.